Here we go. So, just building on what we were talking about before, Dan. Just before you cut out, you were talking about people being coachable.
Yeah.
So, if you had, what's your definition of someone being coachable? What attributes would they have?
Yeah, or just be, absorbing everything that you're showing them, or absorbing everything that you're trying to get across, and you're gonna teach. You can see them understanding and processing it, asking questions, but over anything, it's got to be consistency. Like someone that's not consistently in the gym, I can't do anything with someone that's not consistent.
Yeah.
Like if you're consistent, you'll get a lot out of it, and you'll develop very quickly. But if someone's not consistent, you could have the most athletic, talented guy in the world, but if he's not consistently there, then you're not going to be able to speak the same language with him, or they're not going to understand what you're trying to get across. So then when they're in the ring and they're fighting and you need them to do something, or you want them to react to something, you're not going to have the same level of understanding as someone that's in the gym every day, that's fluent in what you want them to do. And that's what I say with people moving and learning from new coaches. Like if you move gyms, that's like learning a whole different language. And I know this because I've moved gyms a lot, and I've trained with a lot of different coaches, a lot of different gyms around the world. You see people like switch camps and then fight 6 weeks later, or fight 8 weeks later. I tell guys who come to my gym, like they come to my gym and they're like, they move straight away, and then they're just like, okay, I want to fight, I want to fight. And I say, like, I'm basically, if we fight at this point, we're not going to speak the same language. And basically, I'm just going to be able to cheerlead. I'm going to be able to be in the corner. They'll come back and I'll just be like, dig deep. Come on, man. Like, it's like you give them motivational advice, but the technical side of things, which is your number one reason for even being in the corner, is not going to be there. You're there in the corner to give them technical advice on how they should respond. So a fighter that's with you consistently for a long period of time, you're gonna be fluent. You're I like to say fluent. You're fluent in the same language. It's like you going out there after 6 weeks and someone just screaming at you in Chinese. Like you're not gonna know what they're gonna say. Like you're gonna understand the tone of their voice. Them just yelling at you to do something, like you're gonna understand the tone of things, but you're not gonna understand the actual technical application of it.
Yeah, and I completely agree, because as you know, I manage fighters as well, and I've been in that situation a lot with my own guys. So recently, towards the end of last year, I had a fighter contact me, and he said to me, "Hey, we are 6 weeks out of that event you got for me. Things aren't working out at my gym. I have to go to another gym." No, I knew what that meant. I was pretty nervous, but this guy's had over 70 Muay Thai fights, so he's got his own style pretty down packed.
Yeah.
So he was fine. Like, he won the whole tournament. He took everyone out. But I know you're meaning on like a grand scale, most people can't get away with that.
No. Someone with 70 fights is gonna be pretty set in their ways.
Yeah.
And that's like someone, the longer you're been speaking a different language, the longer it's gonna take you to learn a new one. And that's the same thing with like kids. Like you teach kids a number of different languages, they're gonna be able to pick them up a lot quicker. But let's say you've been at that one gym for 70 fights, you've been at one gym for a decade under one system, under one training method, and then you go to a new gym. That's like a 70-year-old man trying to learn a new language. That's like a 70-year-old man speaking one language his entire existence and then being expected to pick up a new language. I don't know about you, but I don't know any 7-year-olds that learn new languages. It's just not done. Like they're too set in their ways. So that's like an entirely different task altogether. Having someone with that much experience to then learn a new system is that's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I think there's like, as with anything, there's exceptions to the rules, you know?
Yeah.
Because
But that's I talked about this with my my coach Twist, because we were talking about it, and I was like, Twist, there's only 2 guys that listen to what I tell them. And he's like, they're from scratch, right? Like those are your guys, those are your guys from scratch. And I was like, yeah, they're from scratch. And he's like, that's why. Like you get anyone from scratch, they've only learned your language, or they've only spoken your language. Like they speak it fluently and they can understand you completely. But people come from different gyms. It's almost like they have to like unlearn a different language, or I have to understand what they're doing, or the language they're trying to speak, until we can find like a mutual translation or a mutual understanding after enough time.
And do you find, obviously, it's harder with fighters who come to your gym who already have kind of like an established career?
Yeah, like it is that, like it takes like a mutual, well, it speeds it up if there's like a mutual like I'm trying to understand them at the same time, like they're trying to understand me. There's like a bit of a mutual effort to understand where each other's approach to the sport.
Yeah, because I know exactly what you mean, because I've managed countless people in that situation, and I had a guy too who I sent him to Japan, but he had been at this particular gym for about a year, and I asked him what his record was up until I had spoken to him. And since going to the new gym, he lost about 2 fights in a row. And the fight that I got for him, he lost that too. But on paper, he should have won it.
Mm.
But then when I look at, okay, he made this transition, now I can understand why. Because, you know, he has to get used to new sparring partners, new coaches, new systems, new drills, new everything.
Yeah, like completely restarting. Completely restarting. You see it a lot with this, you know, the success of city kickboxing. Like people come and they, you know, can see them like rubbing themselves on the mats because they think like a bit of the magic's gonna rub off, but there's no real magic there. Like the magic is that we consistently outwork everyone else. Like that's the magic. We consistently put in more effort than anyone else doing this, and that's the true secret behind the whole thing. So it's funny when people are like, "What's the secret? What's the secret?" And I'm like,
There is no.
"Well, out train everyone every single hour of every single day, and you will be successful." And people are like, "Ah, he doesn't want to tell me the secret." It's I just told you that's the whole secret behind the whole thing. And it's funny that people take it with they don't take it so well.
Yeah, because I mean, having known you for a long time, like the guys that you like came up with, like my brother, all the guys from Strike Force, John Olsen, all those guys, back then when you guys were starting up, all those guys are training as hard as everyone else, you know? And I think the success that you guys got back then, for you when you were younger, is just kind of transferred to now, right?
Yeah, like all of that is just passed down like generationally. Like you look at Carl, like he's not gonna know. He knows, you know, he knows. He's forgotten more than I know when it comes down to coaching.
Yeah.
When it comes down to coaching, but you know, someone will walk into my gym and expect the shortcut, or like, oh, how do I be in the UFC and this, or how do I get into top 10 or get into top 5? Like they'll expect that and expect those results, or me to share like the secret path with them. But any coach that's been doing this for a long period of time. They all know that there's no secret to it, and it comes down to a very special mix of athlete and fighter, and a very special mix of characteristics that will make them successful.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to that thing of what you were saying before, of just that whole GSP thing. Like, you know, people will look at you, how you train. They might see a 2-minute clip, and that 2-minute clip could be you right after a fight camp or a fight, and they could go, "Oh, Dan Hooker does that, so I'll do that to get where he is."
Yeah.
You know, versus actually looking at what you've done in the past 10 years, from when you were 18 and you walked in to John Olson's, and then everything you did up until now. You know, that's what I would tell someone if they said, "How do I be like Dan Hooker?" I'll say, look at what he's done from now till back when he first started.
Yeah. People, it's the same thing. Like, it's a classic tale. People see the end result and they want to mimic the what you've done recently to get that same level of success. But there's a depth of understanding, because I have been through a lot of hardship in my career and taken a lot of tough losses, been dragged out, knocked down, and I just think that the only reason I'm here is I was one of the guys that was able to keep standing back up and keep getting back up and keep dragging myself back to the gym consistently after years and years and years.
And I think something that's real impressive about you, not just your fighting skills or your mental fortitude, but the fact that you're able to fight at such a level while taking care of your daughter, taking care of your wife, taking care of your gym, making sure all your other areas of life are looked after, and being able to work your way up. How important do you think life balance is? I know I use that term balance loosely, because if you want to be great, there's not going to be much balance in your life. But how do you manage it as best as you can?
You know, like, it's the same thing. Like, you can't become a better fighter or a better athlete if you're not becoming like a better person at the same time. They're all one and the same. Like, that's everything. Like, does having a family and daughter, does that distract me, or does that add to my motivation? I feel like it adds to my motivation, and I want to give them a successful life. So then that gives my career direction. You know, the gym as well. People think, oh, isn't having your gym a big distraction from your fighting career? But then that's like a whole community of people that are looking up to you or relying on you to set like a strong example. So having that community,
it's again motivation, right?
It's motivation. It gives, you know, oh, I got to do it not just for myself. I got to do it for this whole community of people that are looking up to me and setting an example. When you're under pressure in a fight and you want people to react a certain way when you're coaching them, what are you going to do in a fight? Like, when a fight gets difficult, just walk out and quit, or back out, or fold. Like, it's then when they get put in the exact same situation, you can't and they quit and they fold. Like, can you stand on the high ground and point the finger at them? No, you can't. So you know, having the gym allows me to set a strong example for them. You know, having my family gives me motivation and gives me strong, defined, clear objectives and goals which I want to pursue in my career.
And I think that's, you know, one of the more impressive things that I've seen, because having, you know, managed fighters and still doing it, I know that a lot of fighters use that as an excuse as to why, you know, they get off track or things like that. So if you had, you know, a young Daniel Hooker or a young athlete or a fighter walk into your gym and have issues with balancing that, what kind of advice would you give them to be able to have success like you have?
Like, finding, it comes down, you know, it'll come down to exact situations between like different fighters that are struggling. And you would just have to, I would have to spend time with the person, and I would have to understand them, and I would have to know know how to get them out of it, because a lot of the
Yeah.
sport comes down to motivation. And what, me saying having a gym allows me, more motivation to succeed. Me having a family gives me more focus. That doesn't mean someone should be training and be
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, Dan says open a gym and get a chick pregnant. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like, that's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
finding that's finding balance within my own journey. Like, I was holding on, like I was saying way earlier at the start, that I was holding it too tight. I was holding the dream, and
yeah,
being world champ, I was holding it too tight, holding it so tight, holding the dream so tight that I was crushing it to bits. You know, my family is my balance. My gym is my balance, which, my gym and coaching and teaching, like, that's a constructive outlet, which is still in the sport, which I'm passionate about, but I'm spending time on other people's careers, and that's like a distraction from my career.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
not like obsessing over that, or focusing on that too much, having a balance of family life. That's again, it just brings balance. That's my time to relax. That's my time to chill. So that's the balance that I've found. But if you're a fighter, and if you're overtraining, or you're holding on to your dream too tight and spending, not many fighters I know are spending too many hours in the gym and are training too much, and that's their problem.
yeah, yeah,
That's my problem. I spend too many hours in the damn gym, and I spend too much time obsessing over the sport. If you're a fighter under that circumstances, well, then maybe you need to find some balance. But most people's is the mirror effect of that, or the polar opposite. And they need to spend more time in the gym, and maybe a little bit more time focusing on their careers. So it comes down to everyone finding balance.
So I guess, like, coming from your background of having that credibility because you've been there, done that, and you're still doing it, do you find it easier um, compared to a coach who doesn't have that same background?
Yeah, I find it
In terms of getting your fighters buying into what you're saying?
yeah, yeah, it would have to be easier, um it would have to be easier from, being on my shoes, and having been there, having done that, then yeah, to pass it on, and to get people to buy in to what you're doing would be a lot more straightforward. Like, yeah, like you need to like, a gym is a community, and you need to
Yeah,
balance that community out. Like, too much, you know macho this and that will like ruin a gym's um environment. Like, too much, oh, it's about flashiness, and it's about this and
yeah,
that, and it's about looking good on Instagram and this and that. Like,
yeah,
that will spoil the environment of your gym. So it's just finding, balance within your own community, I guess.
yeah. And I guess, like, having been around the fight scene for a while myself, I think the biggest learning curve that commercial gyms could learn from, obviously the likes of Carl or you, is the fact that fight gyms have a massive culture
Mm.
or a community or a sense of family, because at the end of the day, you're going in there to fight, and your team has to back you to get ready for that fight.
Yeah. I'm we're incredibly lucky in New Zealand that we have so many. Like, I'm so new to the coaching game. Like I've been saying, I've been coaching 10 years. My
Yeah,
gym's been open almost 2 years full time. But that's baby in the years
yeah, yeah,
in this fight sport, man. There's coaches that have been around 30 years. There's coaches that have been around an incredibly long time. So we're very lucky that the community is already set in place from these guys, and the examples are already set on, how you should conduct yourself. Um, you know, Whether it's a good result or a bad result, like how you should conduct yourself. That's already the culture of New Zealand combat sport is already set very well from a bunch of incredible examples. So I'm lucky that myself as a coach, I get to learn from all these other coaches, and I'm in a time where, you know, these guys are still around. Guys like Eugene, guys like Jason Suddy, like Carl Weber, these, you know, Wayne, Lolo, like these guys are still around, so you can observe and learn from them. You know, I learn so much every time we go to a new event. Every time we go to a show, we learn. You know, my fighters are learning. I'm learning, and I'm just putting it in the bank. Every one of those lessons. So I continue to grow and develop as a coach and as a fighter.
And I think that's probably the most important aspect of any coaching profession. You can't really stop learning, right? You always have to upskill and get better.
Yeah, that's what you're trying to get your fighters to do. They need to constantly evolve and constantly learn and constantly grow, and they're going to observe you. You know, if you're just showing up to the gym and showing the same thing that you did last week, they're gonna, you know, they'll then not copy that. It's monkey see, monkey do, and if they're not seeing you do it, then they're going to not respond and not do it the same way.
And I guess my next question for you is, having been in the professional sports scene myself, I think a lot of people fail to understand that the professionals like you and the guys who are at the top of the sport are still doing the basics. You're still drilling the fundamentals, just like when you were starting out. How many times have you seen people who try and skip the basics to get to the top?
Yeah, that's an incredibly weak foundation. That's building a 10-story building on sand. It's gonna fall apart pretty quickly. But that's one of the major benefits I've had from coaching and imparting that knowledge, is just you get to drill over the basics and the fundamentals so many times, because the game changes. Like at our level in the sport, it can get down to some pretty like finite technical differences, or it comes down to, you know, reading patterns and understanding patterns of your opponents and yours, and how those two patterns are going to match up. For a first 10 fights, 20 fights, like it's not about that. It's about being incredibly well-rounded and incredibly skilled at the fundamentals, and being able to apply those, because 5, 10, 20 fights, like your opponents, you could even watch film on them, but say their last fight was a year ago, but they've only been training for 2 years. That's half of their entire career since you've last seen them fight. So someone can make some pretty big developments and some pretty big improvements in short spaces of time. So you can't focus on one thing or overly obsess over one pattern or one place where you think you have an advantage. You just have to be fundamentally incredibly well-rounded and be able to apply the right technique under the right conditions.
So when it comes to your session that you coach or take people for, like when you start warming up, do you start with like boxing, for example? Would you start with some fundamental stuff like footwork and a bit of shadow boxing, all the easy stuff at the start, or?
It's all fundamental though. It's all easy. I'll show you. I'm gonna demonstrate a beginner jab. Now I'll demonstrate world champion level jab. Like it's the exact same thing. Like it's the exact same situation. And showing up to the gym, you get one piece of the puzzle. You show up another day, you get another piece of the puzzle, and then you get to start to see a picture and start to create. You start to create something. But that's why, like at my gym, I don't have a advanced class and a beginner's class. It's the same thing to me. Advanced and beginner, it's the exact same thing. A fighter jab and a beginner jab, like they're not going to be any different. So I don't see the reason why I would show them differently.
And I guess that's kind of interesting because the amount of gyms that I've seen and timetables that I've seen, that say, 6 to 7 beginners MMA, 7 to 8 advanced, or stuff like that. But you're right, like it's all kind
You'll
of the
come
same.
to a point like I was saying, my gym's pretty new in the game. Like it's pretty. I'm still developing fighters, so
Yeah,
there's not that depth there. There'll come a time, there'll come a time where you'll have like a strong group of guys, which I'll need to separate for a more for sparring and things like that.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you'll need to separate those. So I can see why these gyms that have been around 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, why they need to split these guys up. But yeah, you can't. There's no blanket answer to anything. Like I just can speak from my experience and from my positioning.
Yeah, so I guess like that whole thing's like pretty interesting. So when you, I guess, like corner someone for a fight, like you were saying before, in terms of different personalities, different motivational needs, obviously, like coaching, will that completely change the way that you corner them as well, in terms of cues, like tone of voice, what you tell them, and things like that?
Yeah, like everyone's gonna respond differently. There's some people that I just have to yell at. I just have to, because they respond well to that. There's other people that don't respond well to that, and I just can calmly tell them what they need to do. Okay, you need to do this, or you need to respond this way. But that relationship takes like a very long time and a lot of fights to build. It's not like because a lot of people can change a lot once they step under those ropes. Once they step into those ropes, that's your true test of character. Actually fighting and competing, like you're gonna. A lot of the time, I'll see something which I've never seen, in the gym, or I've seen them like a super tough guy, and then he gets in the fight and he's actually pretty timid or pretty scared. Like your true, like that's why I love this sport so much, because your true character will come out. I've seen some pretty timid or pretty shy people come out and been absolute murderers once they get under those ropes and they start getting put under pressure. Like they're very aggressive, and you can see that. So that relationship and how someone responds, like that takes time. That takes time to understand how they respond, and that can be, say they had 5 fights, but they were much better than the guy just by sheer luck in the matching. Like they just got opponents which they were far better than, and then in the 6th fight they get put under pressure, or they get put in an even fight, and they have to dig a little deeper. Like that's why it's good to experience everything. A hard fight, a difficult fight. I try to match my guys every single fight like a 50-50 fight. Like I feel like every fight should be 50-50. Going in should be a even matchup of skill, as even as I can. Like my fighter, 50% chance he can win, 50% chance he can lose, and I feel like that's how I match my guys, because that's the faster you're gonna learn. Like getting in there at the early stages, and I've seen it. A quick knockout in your first fight can be one of the worst things that's ever happened. That can be one of the worst things that ever happens for your long-term development in combat sports, because you're just gonna go in for the next 10 fights and try to knock the guy out in the first minute of the first round. Like you're having good even contests, back and forth even contests, like that's gonna speed your development up in the sport, regardless of whether you win or whether you lose. Like you're gonna learn more from an even contest or a tough contest than going in there and just overwhelming someone.
And what's actually real interesting about what you just said, Dan, is there was a guy, I won't say his name, but he was a former powerlifter. He got into MMA, and he was on like a 4 or 5 fight win streak, all under a minute. And he fought a guy who had a bit more experience than him, tried the same approach, and he got knocked out in like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You know?
Like
exactly what you
100%,
said. Yeah,
you're gonna go in every time. Like there's no develop from smashing cans. There's no development in that. Like I wouldn't like try to match my guys up just in a there's some fighters like after a while I would throw in for a tougher challenge. I might put them into a this is a 60-40 or this is a 70-30 because you want to see some real development and some real growth. So every fighter in every scenario is different depending on what they're capable of. But the quickest way to develop is to have some good, tough, even contests.
yeah. So I guess like having accumulated the amount of knowledge you do with regards to like strength and conditioning, nutrition, periodization and stuff, what kind of advice do you give your fighters now when it comes to like making weight, when it comes to doing weights and doing everything you do now to get ready for a fight?
Yeah, it's difficult because they all, you can't spoon feed information to
Yeah,
athletes. You can't just be like, okay, at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, you need to eat this, or at Tuesday, like you need to do this, you need to do this. Like you need to teach young fighters how to learn. Like you need to that over anything is a good coach can teach them how to absorb information or point them in direction. Like fight dietitian Geordie. Like I'll send a lot of my fighters like get in contact with Geordie, and if you're serious, like you're gonna absorb the knowledge that he gives you. But yeah, you like spoon feeding someone is once you get like a certain amount of athletes, it's too much, and it's never
yeah,
when you're not there to spoon feed them that day, and they just sit on the couch and they're like, oh, I didn't get told I had to be at training, or I didn't get told that I had to eat that, or I got takeaways because you didn't tell me what to do. It's like it can't work like that. Like you need to understand why you're doing it. So teaching a fighter, like teaching them how to learn, but pointing them in the right direction is what I would say.
and I guess that's the difference between, I guess, like coaching and hand holding, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Like, yeah, that's a classic example. Like a coach will show you technical things and he'll explain it to you, and he can explain the how, the why, the when. Like a pad holder is just going to get you fit and point you at the other guy and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
cheerlead.
So in terms of like your strength and conditioning, how many times a week do you typically do gym work? Whether out of
So
season or leading up
I
to a fight?
generally start 8 weeks on 9 weeks out, 9 weeks out, and from
Yeah,
that 9 week to the 4 week period, I'll do two a day. Um, I mean two, and then in the last 4 weeks leading into the fight, I'll taper that down to um, one session a week. But that's the same thing. Like that's what I used to do early on in my career, was try to learn too much. Like I needed to know
everything.
everything. I needed to know why. I needed to know, like I needed to know everything, and that was more due because I didn't trust. I didn't have that trust there. So I was training for a fight, and I was researching, nutrition, and I was researching weight cutting, and I was researching strength and
Yeah,
conditioning, and researching all your energy systems, and then researching technical side of things. Like it's too much for a young fighter to focus on. I'm lucky that I have found people that I trust.
yeah,
I've found a nutritionist that I trust. I have my strength coach Makoto I've been with for years and years and years, and I trust it. Like I used to ask him, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And you would just get studies and studies and pages and pages of information, like being overwhelmed. And I was just like, man, this is okay. I just trust him now. Like now we're at the point where I trust him. If he tells me to jump, I just say how many times and how high,
yeah.
and that's, find people you trust. You need to surround yourself with coaches that you trust.
So I guess building on what you just said now and before, how important do you think building rapport or building trust in terms of like a coach client, coach athlete, or coach like fighter relationship is?
Yeah, like they need to. It has to be there. It has to be there. You can't second guess your coaches. Then when it comes down to it, you get put under the pump, you get put under pressure in a fight, and he needs you to do something, and you second guess it in that moment, or you second guess it in the training camp like that. This is a game of inches, and something like that, not trusting your coach, that's not a 1 inch mistake. That's you missed that by a mile, you missed that by a couple of miles. Like there needs to be trust there. Like that's a necessity to be, in the professional realm.
Yeah, and what I guess my next question for you is, as soon as you were constructing your gym, and obviously from my background, as soon as I saw your gym gear, I knew who influenced your selection of exercise equipment straight away.
Yeah, that was Makoto 100%. I tried to mirror all the exercises which he has me do, and when I was getting all of my equipment and things, that was entirely Makoto inspired.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, I know him quite well, and over the years, he sent me all those articles like he does. But my thing, I'm probably more like you. I just go, okay, he's winning, he's performing well, obviously it works.
Yeah, well, Makoto has such a depth of knowledge and a depth of understanding inside of this thing. He spent so many, but that's time. A lot of strength and conditioning trainers will just kind of jump into it recently. But Makoto's been around combat sports for such a long time. Like he's been working with coaches, with fighters for more than a decade. Like he's been around the sport, and he knows what works, and he knows what's applied through time and consistent. And like techniques, that's the two most important aspects of this whole game is time and consistency.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's interesting about obviously the way that you train is, I've had people ask me this question too. Why doesn't Dan Hooker's gym have a whole lot of free weights?
Yeah, well, Makoto likes us to use the machine weights, and it can, with I guess he'll be able to give you a more,
Yeah, I know why you train the way you train, but for most people, they will look at it and they'll just go, he's a fighter, he's an athlete, why does he have plate loaded machines in his gym? I know exactly why.
Yeah, well, that's the person that I trust has like instilled that within me, and I know how good I feel when I do the exercises which he puts in place, and I know the amount of effort he puts in. It's not like I see it with a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, like they don't talk to the other coaches. Makoto conversates with Twist, my striking coach. He'll talk to Eugene. He talks to my physio. He talks to my nutritionist. So they're all talking to each other, and they're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I see that'll be the biggest mistake I've seen from the outside looking into other strength and conditioning coaches, is that they just have the fighter show up to strength and conditioning, and they just train them in strength and conditioning, and then they leave. But there's no real shared understanding or shared knowledge between the different coaches. Like, and it'll change every time. Like Makoto will talk to Eugene and talk to Twist. Oh, he wants to do this, or he wants to focus on this specific technique, or he wants to get a bit more power in here, or he's fighting a wrestler, so He just needs to a bit more power, like closer to the ground, or this is going to be a striking fight. You know,
Yeah.
things have to be a bit longer or a bit sharper. Or the guy's taller than him, he needs to explode in, or the guy's shorter than him, he needs to get under him. Like it's but Makoto will know these things because he
Yeah.
talked to all of my other coaches, and that's something that I know that goes on, but I'm not even, you know what I mean? Like that's why it's fun to just be the fighter. You just
Yeah.
get to show up to training, you just get to do something you love, and then at the end of the day, go out there and get to show off all your hard work. You know, all the difficult stuff is taken care of by all of the people that I have put in place and that I trust with your life. At the end of the day, like this is a sport, but it's not like it's incredibly dangerous. So I trust all of my coaches and the team that I have around me with my life.
For sure. And I think like going back to what you said before, like when say for example, I know Makoto, so I know that he'll be the type of guy that if you turned up to training and said, you know, can we change this or adapt to this, he'll be pretty accommodating. And I think at the end of the day, that comes down to knowing your body, right? So you will know that if you're a bit more fatigued or if you're a bit sore from sparring or things like that. Whereas like more inexperienced fighters, they'll just go, oh no, I'll just do it. I'll just push through it.
Yeah, it's time. It's time as well. Like it's knowing your fighter. Like Makoto would know 100% that if I showed up to the gym and I said like I can't do this because of this, like he would trust me as well. Like there's like a
you know
mutual
that it's
trust.
100% genuine,
Yeah,
right?
there's like a mutual trust. He knows that I'm not there to waste his time. He knows that I'm not, you know, I just had a hard session and my legs are a bit sore.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
guess that comes from, you know, Carl's influence.
Oh yeah,
From getting screamed if you're hurt, fuck off. If you're injured, fuck off. If you're just sore, well then get the fuck up and keep going. And that's, you know, I have that voice mentally screaming at me inside the gym. So it helps that, you know, Makoto will talk to Gabe, and Gabe will talk to Makoto. So then I don't even have to be the one because it'll come down to it. And at the I'm like at the point where I won't even want to say it. You know, I won't even want to be like, oh no, this is a bit sore. I can't do this. But Gabe will just talk to my physio will just talk to my strength coach, and he'll just leave me out of it, and he can work around it without even, you know, involving me, which is
and I think
major benefit.
back to that point, you know, what you said earlier about being overwhelmed of too many things. And I think the common denominator now is that you're pretty much autopilot, right? You don't have to really think of a whole lot because you've got a good team that kind of has everything in place. You know that you don't need to worry about, oh, is this person going to do that? Or you can just show up and do your thing, right? So that's being, in my opinion, a true professional athlete where you just autopilot and you perform.
Yeah. Like my training camp is because we've gone through so many, and we've done like, it's now, you know, the changes there's a lot of incremental changes, but there's no like majors. There's not like, oh, we're gonna completely throw this out. And we're gonna because it works, because you can look at the fights that you've won, and you can look at the streak you've been on, and you know for a fact that it works. You know, we're lucky that we can compete and we can be active and consistent, and you know entirely what works. And so there's never big changes anymore. And talking on my part, like all the changes, there's just constantly incremental changes. Like everyone's making incremental changes. So there's a lot of developments getting made, but they're all very slight and all very technical. But the bones of everything, or the skeleton of my, my whole team or my whole machine is already set in place.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is, like, even though you're a fighter and you don't like typically train for the way that you look, if you look at your physique on how it's developed over the last 10 years, you've made some great gains, as people would call it, but that hasn't even been your focus, right? Your focus has just been to get stronger and more powerful as a fighter.
Yeah, like oh man, compared, it's funny, like I at 70 kilos now, my first fight was a lightweight fight. My first fight was like 72 kilos or something like that. Like, and I looked a lot bigger when I was 18 or 19 years old, but I'll be able to squeeze myself to death. Like the actual functional side of things is yeah. You can't be like overly obsessed as a combat athlete with the way you look. Like, going back to GSP, like he says, yeah, I lift weights, or I do, I do this, I do weights, but I know like why I'm doing weights in the off season. It's to look good on the poster, so I sell some tickets. Like, at least he knows why he's doing it, and it can be a lot of objectively, but I've gone into some fights, and my personal opinion of myself is I didn't look that great, but I felt amazing. Everything was there, and I felt like super amazing. Or I've gone into other fights in the past and looked phenomenal and looked great and had the whole abs going on and everything, but in reality, like, I felt like shit. Like, I felt slow. I felt heavy. I felt, so it's not how you look. It's how you feel. When it comes down to the test, or it comes to the fight.
And I think that's awesome hearing that from your mouth and from someone of your level, because obviously, like, a lot of the female fighters that I manage, as you would understand as a coach, they always freak out about the way they look. But from my perspective, if they feel good on the mat or in the ring and they make weight and they do real well in the fight, who cares if they have abs or not,
Like, irrelevant, you know what I mean? Like, you just have to be better than you were yesterday. Like, you can't look at someone else and be like, I need to look like that. Like, you just need to focus on yourself. There's a lot of young fighters, like, they're just like they compare themselves to other people like constantly. You can't do that. You need to focus on yourself and be better than you were yesterday. I felt better than yesterday, or I feel better than last week, or the week before, or the month before. Like, that's all that you need to focus on, is yourself and your growth and your development. It's a selfish game. Like, get selfish. Get selfish.
And I know that because I grew up around it. I lived with it for a long time. So I guess, like, for you, in terms of like weight cuts and stuff, I know that I talked to you about this a couple of weeks ago. You've fought people who have cut quite a bit of weight to fight you, and they've looked extremely, like, muscular, right? But you knocked them out. So from my perspective, do you think there's a drawback of dropping too much weight when you're just better off fighting at a heavier weight class, that you don't have to?
It comes down to the style that a fighter tries to impose, and the style of their opponent. Like, I'm not like a power striker. Like, I'm not like a power guy. Like, I don't rely heavily on athleticism. I rely on my accuracy and my timing more over that. So if you're a big muscle bound fighter who's not that technically sharp, and you try to bring those attributes against me, then it doesn't match up very well. But if you're skillful as well, and skillful and athletic, and your timing is there, like, you have to be so well rounded in every single aspect. And that's why I love competing in the top 10 of the division, or the top 5, because just the skill is there, man. Like, everyone is so well rounded. It's such it's so good to train for that. It's so easy to get motivated for these fights because the challenge is so tough, you know.
And I think people don't know the significance when it comes down to, you know, the fact that you can knock someone out, but not only that, the fact that you can knock someone out who's at the top of the sport like you are, or submit someone like Mark Diakese, or, you know, things like that. People just go, oh, he's good on the ground, he's good at stand-up, but they fail to understand like the level of which those guys are just as skilled, if not, you know, around the same level as you, and they're trying to do the same thing. They've been training for as long as you have.
Ah, 100%. But you know, the true fans of the sport know that, and they can understand that. You know, you can't spend your life fighting for the average Joe. That'll be that'll be a pretty way to fighting for the people that appreciate the technical side of things and what goes into it is far better to spend your time focusing on.
Yeah, and I guess you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, but just on closing, like a lot of people think that to get into MMA or to be good at MMA, you have to have a base of one kind of martial art, right? But from my understanding, you had like entered the sport from nothing, and then you like just started, you did everything at once, right? Like MMA is your background, that's your backbone.
Yeah. No, MMA was my introduction to the sport, so I've approached everything like equally. That like what martial art you started shouldn't influence too much. Like you just have to be, you know, if you do any one martial art, if you spend 5 or 10 years doing jiu-jitsu before you step into MMA, like from what you learn to get good at jiu-jitsu is what you should apply to get good at kickboxing. Like you should know, you should just use the skills you have learned from your time in jiu-jitsu taught you how to learn, so you can mimic the things you learned, the things that were successful in getting you good at jiu-jitsu. You can apply those to kickboxing. It's not like you already know how to learn. You can just apply that to all the different martial arts, and that'll save you a lot of time in the long run.
And I think that's real interesting, you know, because I've seen a lot of fighters who come from a background of a specific martial art, and they'll try dominate people with that, but it doesn't always work because they try just fall back on what they know instead of applying that to all the other areas like you said they should, right?
Yeah, like you see it like a lot of people, they'll take their base martial art and then just try to add things on instead of like they'll just add it on to their jiu-jitsu game. But instead of any new martial art like striking, wrestling, ground, like you have to drill the whole fundamentals, and you have to start from the start and not skip any steps, or it's gonna cost you time